Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, Big Shot Bill. And on today's show, we are going to recap the happenings at World Series of Fighting 22. We're also going to talk about the big pay-per-view, apparently the biggest pay-per-view of all time in UFC 190. And we're going to recap, or rather pick the fights for UFC Nashville on Fox Sports 1 this weekend from the Music City. As I mentioned, I am your host, Jim Gramm. He is Mr. Billy Brand. How's it going today, Billy?
Good. I'm a little fired up today, though.
As fired up as Jake Shields' corner after World Series of Fighting 22?
Exactly what I'm mad about.
All right, let's start there. World Series of Fighting 22. If you didn't know, which I'm assuming most of you didn't, considering you were probably watching UFC 190, or at least the prelims of it, World Series of Fighting had an event this weekend, their 22nd event, and it's going over well for kind of the wrong reasons. Before we get to the big headline, let's first talk about Marlon Moraes as he took on Shondo Moraes, guy with the same last name. And once again, Marlon Moraes dominant. Gets the knockout in the third round. And I'm sorry, rather the submission, I believe. This kid, Billy, I don't why he re-signed with the World Series of Fighting. I have no idea. It's proven that they cannot find another 135er that can touch this kid, and he should have moved on to the UFC. He had the opportunity. Why he stick with World Series of Fighting, I don't know, but. Once again, here's kind of another nobody. They present in front of Marlon, and he dispatches them once again with another nice finish.
Yeah, I don't know. How old is Marlon Moraes?
I think he's 26, maybe?
He still is young. I don't know how long that contract is, but, I mean, how long can you sit here destroying these guys till you want to move up to, like, the top competition?
Yeah, it's... And this fight really wasn't even his best performance, to be quite honest. I mean, he obviously beat the guy, but if you watch this fight, he was kind of slow. He was methodical. You know, he landed some nice combinations. His opponent got a couple of nice shots in, but nothing to me that really worried myself or probably worried Marlon. And then, towards the end there, he got the rear naked choke at 346. And this guy's already training with UFC talent, Billy, in Frankie Edgar and Edson Barbosa over there in New Jersey. So, he's training with some of the top guys in the sport. And if you're not going to present him with a challenge, whether that's going out and, Bibiano Fernandez is fighting over there in ONE FC. You can't tell me you can make a deal like you ship him out for one fight or bring him in or something. That's about the only guy I could think of that's not signed to a major North American organization that you could bring out there that, most casual fans wouldn't know, but the hardcore fans would probably know. And other than that, there's not really much for him to fight out there if he's not in UFC or even Bellator has a good 35 division.
Yeah, I got to imagine if he fights out this contract and he's still basically on top and looking as strong as he has been, he will go to a UFC or even maybe a Bellator or something, one step forward.
All right, now the main event of UFC, or rather World Series of Fighting 22, was Rousimar Palhares against Jake Shields. And the reason I got confused, UFC, they both have fought in the UFC most recently before moving over to World Series of Fighting. And for the most part, Jake Shields was winning this fight. He took the fight right to Rousimar Palhares. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe that was a bad thing, as he was kind of going into the lion's den there, and the great submission expert that is Rousimar Palhares. And to Jake Shields' credit, he actually did some damage. He switched up, landed some nice elbows. I thought he was looking pretty good. And then in the third round, there was kind of a scramble. You see Palhares go for an arm and kind of rolls him, and then Shields rolls with it and ends up going into a rolling Kimura. And he gets the tap and gets the finish, but not without, once again, possibly holding on too long. And when we were watching UFC 190 together, I think you ended up showing me like a GIF of the ending there. And when I saw the little bit there at the end where he's holding the submission, I didn't think it was that bad at first glance. Then I went later in the night and watched the actual fights, saw it in full time, from where he sets it up to that. And once I saw the fight in full time, I was like, yeah, he kind of did hold on to that long. It seemed a lot worse watching it in real time than it did just watching that 5-second clip of him holding on too long. But I believe, I don't know how many times Shields taps. People say 6 or 7. Then you got Mazzagatti came over and is tapping on the back 6 or 7 times before he finally pulls off. Now Mazzagatti is getting some heat once again, kind of for the eye gouging thing. But I think in this scenario, this might be a case where you see the referee kind of do like the tackle to stop the fight.
100%.
And I think Mazzagatti, knowing Polara's reputation, or at least if he doesn't, he should. I don't know how you're refereeing this morning. You don't know his reputation. Should have maybe implied like a tackle type technique. Because if you see a referee kind of jump on you, even if he doesn't let go of the hold, there's really not much more you can do, and you look like you did your job correctly. But just tapping him on the back, a guy like Polara's, as big as strong as his, he's probably going to still hold on because that's kind of what he does. And I will say he held it on too long. However, after this, Jake Shields took offense to this with good reason, but still not great conduct by him, as he threw back and threw a punch after the fight had already been stopped. So for as much as people want to say, Paul Harris did wrong, so did Jake Shields. He's not innocent in this whole thing. He answered a bad move. What's that? Eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. He could have been the bigger man there, and he still could have yelled at him. I'm not saying you can't be angry or upset, but you can't throw a punch after the bell, whether it was a just stoppage or guy holding, however that you want to look at it. I guess you could say, at least you could say it was somewhat justified. It wasn't quite Paul Daly and Josh Koscheck or anything like that, but definitely something that he should be suspended for. So when this this happened Saturday, so Monday, it came out that the World Series of Fighting had stripped Husamar Polares of his welterweight title and is on definite suspension. And then the Nevada State Athletic Commission also announced that both of them will be facing a hearing and possible suspension from the commission. And as of today, just a few hours ago, the Nevada State Athletic Commission has suspended both Polares and Shields. And I'm trying to find a length of time. It looks like they're indefinitely suspended, and the earliest both fighters can have the suspension lifted or extended, they're going to have a disciplinary review hearing on September 13th, and that is according to Adam Hill of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. This article then was reprinted by Steve Joan of MMA Mania, and in the interim, also the win bonus for Polares is being held, and it's said that the World Series of Fighting now may be saying that the winner of John Fitch against Yushin Okami in October may be the fight to fill the vacant welterweight title. So not in an indefinite length of time. It looks like they're going to revisit things in September, but I would imagine Polares gets a more severe suspension than Jake Shields, but I would imagine neither is going to fight again here in 2015.
Yeah, I don't know where to start with this fight with how angry I am, because first off, I'm just going to talk Mazzagatti, because I don't like how he refed this at all. I mean, with the eye gouging, the dude did nothing about it, and that was a big change of momentum in the fight because Shields was dominating. And then with the submission, when you know a guy like Paul Harris, like you're saying you should tackle him, you can't just tap him on the shoulder. Like, look at like Herb and Ronda. You got to yank them off. Like, Shields, I think it came out that he injured his shoulder there, and he's out for like 6 months now. So it did do some serious damage, which is why I kind of give Shield a pass. I mean, you can't throw the punch, obviously. You're going to get in trouble. It's not worth it. But I don't know. There's so many things to be angry about. Polares, I expect it. We know how he is. We've seen his past, and I think what's done is right now. He'll be stripped. I don't think we'll see him in any major organizations anymore. Mazzagatti, I never want to see ref a fight again.
Yeah, it's well, I shouldn't say it's a shame because World Series of Fighting knew what they were getting into when the UFC cut him loose after doing this not once but twice. Though again, I will go on record again and say the second time he got caught, the one that got him cut, I didn't think was that bad. I will say that. The one against Mike Pierce was definitely bad. And in fact, Mike Pierce has not fought in MMA since that fight. Just in case where people are wondering. So whether that's Mike Pierce decided to retire as well, but you got to look at that as definitely impacting a guy's career if he hasn't fought again. And it's been quite a few years. And I guess I can say it's a shame because Polaris is a talented guy.
Yeah, he's so good.
You could make a case that if he was in the UFC, he could be fighting for a title. The guy's submission skills are at 170, probably only matched by Damian Maia. And then you add in his, Hector Lombard, type frame, very short, squatty, powerful guy, low center of gravity, really hard to deal with, and, really scary power when it comes to one-punch knockout power. So he is a guy that definitely is one of the top in the world. But I even read an interview, I believe it was on MMA Fighting, where they kind of talked to Ray Sefo, who's the president of World Series of Fighting, afterwards, and he goes, it's weird. He goes, Polaris, when you talk to him, even in Portuguese with a little English he can speak, he seems like a nice guy, he is respectful, but when he gets in that cage and he holds that submission, it's like he's going to kill the guy. And he's like, he goes, this isn't a war. He goes, this is a sport. When it's over, it's over. That was kind of the quote he was given. And I guess Polaris, I guess there's a switch in his head that turns on when he has somebody in his clutches, like a shark or something. He just goes crazy and doesn't. I think he kind of blacks out mentally. I don't think he's realizes he's in a fight for sport and for money, and I think he somehow his brain switches over, whether that's an actual thing or just something he does, subconsciously or consciously. It switches over, and he's going out for blood.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that he can only spar and stuff with his brother or something because no one will train with this dude because he's the same way in practice. He just has that. If he's going, it's 100% to kill or something. I don't know what it is, but it's not good.
Yeah, it's something that is obviously probably too late for him to correct. I believe he's already 36 years old. He's been fighting close to 30 professional fights. This is now the fourth or fifth time he's kind of held on to a submission too long. He's probably not going to change. And it's kind of late in the game to change that up. And World Series of Fighting, they took a chance on this guy and probably didn't pay off for him. I don't know how much they were paying him or whatnot, but I don't think it paid off. And with this, as crazy as Scott Coker kind of has been now with Bellator, I definitely don't even think he touches this.
Yeah, it's not a good look for Rousimar Palhares or World Series of Fighting, but it's probably the most attention they've gotten in a while, so it brings their name up a lot at least.
Right, and considering how many people were talking about UFC 190, they always say any press is good press, but for World Series of Fighting already kind of making a mistake, putting a fight the same night as a UFC card, albeit a Ronda Rousey UFC card, and then had this happen, not a good weekend for World Series of Fighting.
No, and then I don't know. Well, this doesn't really have to do with World Series, but that whole Diaz brothers thing outside and everything. So a lot of problems for them.
Right. Well, it kind of did because the Diaz brothers were there in support of Jake Shields, their teammate. And I guess I think this was after the fight, though. Correct?
I think they were kind of scuffling before, I think during the walkout. And then after the fight is when the real thing happened in Planet Hollywood or something. They got in a big brawl.
Right, and the weird thing is that Khabib has no affiliation with Palhares, but I think it stems from that. I think those two guys were fired up about the incident, and they're already kind of fired up. They're really passionate guys, and I think they saw Khabib, who, fellow UFC lightweight competitor, and I think that with what just happened to their teammate Jake Shields, I think kind of boiled over. I think if something like that doesn't happen to Jake Shields, we probably don't hear about a brawl between, Nate Diaz and Habib. I don't think that happens. But, when emotions are running high, you see a guy, maybe he does something little like, you guys suck or something, it's something little that normally maybe wouldn't bother them. But in that state, maybe they've had a few drinks or something. Yeah, that really changes your perspective on things. So it doesn't surprise me too much of hearing about a brawl between a Diaz brother and somebody else in the UFC.
No, yeah, as the Diaz brothers, I'm a big fan, but I expect that type of stuff from them. That's kind of how they are, and like especially with a guy like Khabib, he talks a lot too. So when they butt heads, that's going to happen almost every time. I think it's just those two type of people.
All right. Well, the last bit of news we want to talk about, the UFC has made some pretty big fight announcements. One of them, hopefully, we'll get to talk to this particular fighter here. Already booked for UFC 193. She had a tough loss there against Miesha Tate just a week ago, a little over a week ago at UFC on Fox 16. Jessica Ai is already to go back in action as she has booked a fight for UFC 192, taking on Juliana Pena, the first ever female tough champion. I don't know whether or not that's going to be on the main card or not. I think it should be, but I think Jessica wants to get rid of that loss to Miesha really quickly, and UFC didn't give her anyone too easy because Pena, albeit maybe against a little lesser competition, so far has just plowed through everybody she has faced.
Yeah, this is a good matchup for Jessica Ai to get right back on the bandwagon and keep moving forward. And then for Pena, it's a step up in competition. She's never ran into that much trouble yet, so we'll see what happens here.
Also, I guess it will also be part of the Tough Latin America finale card in Monterrey, Mexico, officially known as UFC Fight Night 79. It's found its main event. One of the coaches of Tough Latin America, Kelvin Gastelum, he will be allowed back into the welterweight division. And boy, what a welcoming committee is, as he will have to take on, the the punches and bunches, the blitzkrieg, and the constant pressure of the man from Xenia, Ohio, in the immortal Matt Brown.
Yeah, this is going to be such a good fight. Gassman puts a lot of pressure. Matt Brown puts a lot of pressure, and they're just going to meet in the center, and basically like every Matt Brown fight, really.
Also, the UFC, it's not official, but December 5th, they already have an event scheduled. Not a location yet, but UFC has been hinting at a big show. And by big, I mean not just Vegas. I mean, we're talking the big place you go with the big cowboy hats and where everything's bigger. The Big D, Dallas, Texas. And not just the American Airlines Arena like they used for UFC 185. The real big stadium, Cowboy Stadium, 100,000 seats for potentially Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate 3, and Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo for the undisputed featherweight championship is rumored for Dallas. And I got to say, if you're going to go big, I know Vegas is the fight capital of the world, but people underestimate Dallas. It's a big area. There's a lot of stuff to do. That stadium is gorgeous. There's like a mall in it. There's stuff to do there in Dallas. There's some great bars if you like shooting things, like listen to country music. I mean, to me, it's perfect for Irish people to go in, right? They like drinking and shooting stuff, right? And so all those fans from Ireland, I think, will have some fun down there in Dallas. And the weather's, probably a little colder than Vegas, but I mean, it's still a lot better than being where we're at here at Billy in Detroit during December 5th. So, and obviously Dallas has hosted Super Bowls and stuff. I think people are underestimating what you can do in Dallas, but I honestly think it's a perfect venue, and I think it's going to draw a lot of people just coming in around the city there for that event if it goes down, which I think is a great idea.
Yeah, I hope it does. That's such a big stadium. If they can do that, it'll be so huge, and I think it will draw a lot of people. Even myself, as soon as they announce that, I'm like, all right, if they do that, I'm probably gonna have to make a trip out there. Like, I think a lot of people will go, and I think it'll be a success, especially with those two on there. I don't know how big it will be, but it will for sure beat UFC 100, beat anything.
Now, I believe Manny Pacquiao had one of his fights there, and they had 50,000 people come to basically his fight. We're talking about an 11-fight UFC card with Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor.
I think it'll do that for sure. I don't know. How many does it hold? Do you know for sure how much?
It holds well with the seats and everything. It definitely will be over 100,000. Now, there's no way they get that. I don't know if very few shows. I mean, obviously a Cowboys football game, but short of that, I'm not really sure what. I mean, that's a huge arena. I wouldn't doubt if their upper deck or triple upper deck are cordoned off, but either way, I would still. We'll see. I think they did a little over 40 for the Rogers Center, correct? When they did the GSP Shields fight. So to me, that's kind of the over under is 40,000. I think if they can get over 40,000, I would consider that for a live gate. I would consider that a success.
I might be crazy, but if they do Conor Aldo, Rousey, Misha, I think they'll do around 70, 80.
I mean, they definitely are doing a million buys for the pay-per-view.
Sure.
That's without saying. And speaking of pay-per-view buys, we haven't talked about that in a while, but early reports are that UFC 190 may have outsold UFC 189. Now, again, these numbers are confirmed, but it looks as though UFC 189 is topping out very close to 1 million at over 800,000, somewhere in between 800 and 900. And again, no confirmed reports for UFC 190 yet, but it looks as though earlier reports are coming in that it may have done 1.3 million, which surprises me. Did I think it would do over 500,000? Absolutely. I think that was safe to say. But considering how big 189 was, regardless of whether or not Aldo fought, that was a tremendous event. And I think a lot of people were hyped about it. And obviously, you know, the card, you can't argue, was a better card than 190. Now, that's not what we're arguing. But what may be underestimated in all this is how big Ronda Rousey has gotten, I think, since February, her last fight. I think that 16-second fight, the Expendables and Fast and the Furious, I think she's kind of hit another stratosphere that, to be honest, I think the only other fighter that can maybe compare to that is Chuck Liddell in terms of fame. And she's just kind of at another level in terms of crossover status. And, you know, people talked about GSP and John Jones and, you know, being crossover stars and maybe Silva a little bit. But, you know, Ronda Rousey is right up there now. In fact, is number one in terms of active. And I think if the 190 ends up outpacing 189, that's what you got to look to as far as a reason.
Yeah, I knew it'd be a big fight. Obviously, Ronda's that big, but I did not think it'd do 1 million. And I think exactly like you said, I was ignorant to how big Ronda is. Like, she's not just a big for a UFC fighter no more. She's like a household name and fame. So, I mean, it's good. It's good for the sport, and especially she's like the best ever. I mean, there's no comparing it. So, I'm glad to see it, and I hope we get to see her fight some. I don't want to say real competition. She is fighting the best competition she can, but I want to see some good fights her way.
Also, real quickly, Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz, Nevada State Athletic Commission hearing is scheduled for next week on the 13th. What are the odds it gets pushed back again, Billy?
It's never going to happen. We're never going to see them again.
I'm going to say 50-50 it gets pushed back till the same date as Shields and Palhares is going to be pushed back another month. I think it's 50-50. It's a good chance. Yeah. They're like, you know, we already got that on the books. Let's just move then.
Diaz will get in a brawl with Paul Harris. That'll be the next headline.
Well, let's get to that UFC 190. And 7 fights were featured on the main card. We're not going to go quite in order, but we're going to start with the 2 tough fights first to kind of get them out of the way, as we had Ronaldinho Vieira against Lionel Lopez, and this actually was a pretty exciting fight. This was one of the few fights that were pretty exciting here on this card. Vieira ends up pulling out the split decision victory, and I'm sorry, unanimous decision victory, as he got 30-27 twice and a 29-28, but very close fight. The first round, very close in strikes. Lopez did have a takedown, and Vieira had a slight advantage in the striking, 31-28. Then Lopez, this is kind of where I thought was interesting here in the scoring, Billy, with the two judges giving him 30-27. Lopez had another takedown in the second round and outstruck him 31-14. So very surprising that two judges still gave Vieira that round. In the third round, though, all Vieira. I think Lopez was forcing the takedowns and trying for that guillotine, 4 or 5 times. I think his arms were just dead, and Vieira just, man, he kind of lit him up there. 82-14 in terms of landed strikes for Vieira, and I think he cemented that third round. And albeit a close first round, probably lost the second. The third round, he definitely put some stamp on that, and I think the third round got him the victory there to become one of the next Ultimate Fighter Brazils.
Yeah, before I even get into this, I just want to say I don't like how they did this at all. And if you are going to throw these guys on this card to make it, why throw them in the middle? I don't get why they didn't just have them started off. I don't know. But as far as the fight goes, this was a great fight. I didn't think it was a 30-27 at all, but they both really going for it in anything, whether it's a guillotine, the stand-up, everywhere that they all went for it. And I think it just came down to who had a little more heart, honestly. And Vieira got the better of him, but I didn't think it was a 30-27. I thought he lost that second round. But it was a good fight for them. I just wished it would have either been on the prelims or they started the fight an hour early or even just kicked off the card.
And looking at the other fight, this was in the lightweight division. The last one was in the bantamweight division as Glacio Franca took on Fernando Bruno. And I think the size of Franca, who just looked huge compared to Bruno, I think just kind of wore on Bruno. I just don't think he had much of an answer. I mean, when you really look at takedown attempts, he stopped 5 takedowns. He was only taken out 4 times out of 9. But I think that having to deal with the size and stopping the takedowns, he had his back taken a couple of times from those takedowns. I just think that eventually wore on him. And there towards the end, he kind of gave up that choke pretty easily. And Franca was able to get the tap officially at the 4:46 marker. And I think Franca, like I said, the size just kind of wore him, not super impressive. He got the victory. He did what he needed to do. But for Bruno, we saw this before the fight. We kind of said, no, this guy's probably not going to stick around at 155. And I think this fight kind of proved that wherever his UFC future may go, it's not going to be at 155 pounds.
Yeah, I don't know. He looked a little too small there, and like it was nothing major impressive. Frank dude, I think he just kind of broke him. He realized all right, and kind of gave that choke out. So hopefully he'll drop down and fight more people close to him, and then we'll see what he can offer.
All right, let's get to the actual first fight of the evening in the women's strawweight division as Claudia Gadelha took on Jessica Aguilar. And what a performance here by Gadelha. I was not quite expecting this, as she was able to outstrike the former World Series of Fighting champion 121-88 and was successful on 4 of 4 takedowns. I thought she just completely outclassed Jessica Aguilar. And I think Aguilar, I'm not really sure what her game plan was. I don't think she was expecting the level of striking that we saw from Gadelha. And I also don't think that she was expecting that few of takedowns, to be quite honest. I think she was expecting more takedown attempts, more fighting off the cage and countering from getting off the cage and scrambling and maybe using some leg kicks and movement. But we saw Aguilar relatively flat-footed and just kind of standing and trading with Gadelha, which towards the end, Aguilar was definitely messed up. Her face was busted. Not only was surprised at striking, she couldn't deal with that. And I think the power. I think she was also surprised by the power Gadelha has. And I think that really just threw Aguilar off her game. And kind of when it got towards the end there, Gadelha obviously, slowed down a little bit. Aguilar lands some nice leg kicks, but really other than a few of those leg kicks, Billy, Aguilar didn't really offer much for Gadelha. And considering all the hype she had, coming into the UFC, she definitely fell flat in her octagon debut.
Yeah, she was caught off guard by a lot, and the most she amounted in offense was those leg kicks, but I think she was kind of letting them go too late. I think that was on like the third, if I remember. And Gadelha, I mean, it's a really good fight for her and being so dominant, because we want to know, all right, if she gets that fight with Joanna, is it going to be the same fight? or is Joanna going to be a different level now? And I think she proved being this dominant that maybe that fight with Joanna she did win, or it will be that close again. Because that fight they had was super close. It was a split, and a lot of people don't know either way who really won.
In this fight, like we said, we saw improved striking. I thought her conditioning was even better than in the Joanna fight. And for Aguilar, I think she can be somebody like Gadella, but she had to keep moving in that fight. She had to see more circling, more sticking and moving, and we didn't see that from her. And that's something we've seen in the World Series of Fighting. So like I said, I don't know if it's she wasn't studying film of Gadella, or she was completely caught off guard by the striking, or the power affected her. And, maybe she kind of looked like she had a broken nose a little bit. So maybe that happened early and it affected her breathing. Whatever the case may be, that was not the Jessica Aguilar, who did rattle off this huge winning streak here coming into the UFC.
Yeah, they say UFC jitters. Who knows? Even that, you never know.
And also, she's fought particularly in either Mexico or US. I don't think she's ever fought in Brazil before. Even though the time zone's not that different, you got to fly all the way to Brazil. You add in, like you said, fighting for the UFC. A lot of new stuff for her to kind of deal with.
Yeah, and I mean, Gadella is that good too. It's not like they gave her a warm-up fight or nothing. Like, Gadella's that good, so it's a tough first fight for her. But I do think she still has a good future. I don't think this is I don't think she can hang with UFC. She definitely can. She'll have some adjustments to make, and I think she'll be good.
The next fight of the evening was in the heavyweight division as Antonio Bigfoot Silva took on the Hulk Sol Paleli. And after a fairly obvious win in the first round for Sol Paleli, as he was able to outstrike Silva 45-17, also got a takedown, was able to stay on top and land some damage. I don't know what changed in round number 2, whether it was Paleli just being tired or Silva just not wanting to deal with getting taken down again. But whatever the case is, Antonio Bigfoot Silva kind of came out with the axe to grind, came out on fire, outstruck Sol Paleli 12-1 to get the knockout there very quickly into the second round at 41 seconds. And I don't know if this is just Paleli just folding or Silva deciding to actually fight. I don't know what the case is, but very few fights you watch that end in the second round knockout happen with the first guy kind of getting completely dominated. It was a huge change in pace and momentum, and I'm not really sure what happened with Sol Paleli, but Antonio Bigfoot Silva, took advantage of that and was able to come from behind and get the win.
I think Sol Paleli kind of broke in this fight because he kind of shines with his ground and pound, and I think he got Silva down and he gave his ground and pound, and he didn't finish him. And then that second round, I think he shot a takedown and got stuffed or something. I think once he realized he couldn't get it again, and he kind of just broke. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, Bigfoot's hands are huge, but those punches didn't look the cleanest when he fell. And, I don't know. I think Bigfoot just kind of broke him there when he couldn't get that takedown the second.
Yeah, because he kind of hit him with I believe it was kind of a grazing right that may have missed or barely hit the top of the head. And then I think he handed one uppercut, and a couple others ones were kind of blocked. They didn't really get through clean, like you said. But yeah, I don't know if Paleli retires after this, but he's already 36 himself. I don't know how many more years he actually has fighting, but if he's going to fight like that, then he's not going to have a very long future, at least in the UFC.
Yeah, he's gonna have to do something different. I don't know what it is, but like I said, I don't know, because I feel like he kind of broke there, but I think maybe it's just not his night, because he's done good in the past and he's had good knockouts with his ground and pound. And 36, that seems up there, but in heavyweight, that's like all the top 10, So we'll see where he goes from here.
The next fight of the evening, also in the heavyweight division, as Stefan Struve took on Minotauro Nogueira, better known as Big Nog. And what a valiant effort, though, by Nogueira. I mean, he tried his hardest. 14 takedown attempts, was only successful on one of them. Striking, believe it or not, he actually only got outstruck by 10, 94-84. And I think if it wasn't for maybe wearing himself out doing too many takedown attempts and getting caught with a couple of nice jabs, straight rights, and I think that head kick, I thought Nogueira performed admirably for a guy who's 39 years old, has fought as many times as he has. And for Stefan Struve, he got the win, yes, but I don't know if he was gun shy. First fight healthy, a new camp, training Brazil, fighting Nogueira. I'm not sure what the case was. It felt like he could have done more in this fight. Like, he did enough to win, but you and I were kind of sitting there wondering, like, when's he gonna unload? When's he gonna land a nice, like, 5 straight combo? When's he gonna do something to make Nogueira really nervous? When's he gonna go in for the kill? Or when's he gonna do this? And it just didn't seem like he pulled the trigger enough in this fight. And he could have really solidified this victory and show that Stefan Struve is back on the map, heavyweight division, be on the lookout. But that was not the case on Saturday night.
Yeah, like, props to Nogueira, because this big fight for him, 39, he goes out there, he took some big shots that wobbled him hard, and he'll keep forward and keep the pressure on. But for Struve, this is really disappointing, because I think as durable as Nogueira is, I think he could have been able to finish him a lot of times, but he was just kind of, I don't know if he was just overcautious. I know he's went through a lot recently, so I kind of give him a break there, because it's getting back in that ring, getting comfortable again. But he landed some really big shots, and he never really, like, let it go, never really let his combos or nothing. He'd land the one, kind of let Nogueira wobble back, and that'd be it. So I want to see a lot more of him. And, like, he has such a good reach, and it seemed like he didn't even start using that till, like, the third, when he started letting that jab in his face and stuff. So there's a lot more I'd like to see from him.
Now, maybe we're underestimating how much 14 takedown attempts, or stopping 13 of them, kind of take a toll on you, and maybe that was the case for the lack of output. But regardless, like you said, he had opportunities to capitalize on with the striking, didn't do it, he never really established his range. Like you said, he landed a few jabs there towards the third, but for a guy that had almost a foot reach advantage, not to mention, Nogueira being a little over 6 foot, him being 6'11", basically 7 foot, having to punch up to hit him, just he didn't use that well. So even though this is a win that Stefan Struve really has to look at this tape and really break down and go, I got to do things differently. I did enough to beat a guy. Nogueira now has come out his last fight. He's going to retire, and I think he went out with a great performance worthy of the champion that he was. But this is a fight he'll have to look at and go, all right, if I truly want to compete in the UFC and be a top guy in this division, I can't fight like that, because the better guys in this division will knock me out.
Yeah, and it's tough because Struve is so young for this heavyweight division at 27, and then with his size, if he can learn how to use that reach more and get better, there's so much potential he has, and we've seen glimpses of it with Stipe and stuff, seeing how good Stipe is, and I really hope he can find it, but there's something needs to change, because he has went through some tough knockouts, and even a fight like this where he could have finished pretty good, but he let Nogueira stay in there.
Nogueira's brother, Rogério Minotauro Nogueira, he fought against Shogun Rua, the former UFC champion, a rematch of the two when they first met back in Pride in 2005, and maybe not quite as good as that fight in Pride, but still pretty good, as Shogun Rua was able to get out a unanimous decision, 29-28 on all 3 cards. A very dominant first round for Little Nog, as he was able to outstrate Shogun 40-17. It kind of looked like he was close to a finish. Entering that second round, it kind of looked like, maybe Nogueira will knock him out here. Shogun didn't look too good. And in the second round, Shogun was able to change things up quickly, not allow the crisp striking of Nogueira to kind of get to him anymore. Got a takedown, was able to outstrike Lil Nog 29-14, definitely secured that round. And then in the third, I think that confidence with the takedown, maybe he wore Nogueira out. We saw Shogun get back to the striking, as well as use some ground and pound there towards the end, as he was able to land a takedown, outstrike Nogueira 36-19. Close fight, but I think Shogun did enough in those final 2 rounds to kind of come back and get the victory and deserve the 29-28. But Nogueira looked drastically improved from his last fight against Rumble Johnson. But like I said, Shogun was able to score in a few takedowns, and I think that kind of was the difference in the fight.
Yeah, Nogueira, I will give him credit. He looked better than I thought. Both of these guys had more in the tank left than I thought. I thought this fight was going to be pretty sad to watch, but then again, looking back at that Rumble fight, he never really had a chance. Like we didn't even get to see. And he had Shogun hurt. I thought this might end in the first. Shogun was in some trouble. I think the difference was after that, I want to say he was one dimensional, but he just came forth that same boxing when Shogun will change it up a little bit, mix in his takedown, and overall get the better of him in the next 2 rounds. So good win for Shogun. And I know he accepted that, I think, Rampage now. Hopefully that fight happens. That'll be good. For Little Nog, he did look better, and he showed he had a little left. I don't know where he goes from here, though.
Well, unlike his brother, the UFC has not forced him to retire. So as far as we know, he's probably going to fight at least one more time. And I think because how good this fight was, in terms of quality, and him winning the fight of the night bonus, I think he gets one more fight. And I think if he loses that, then yeah, I think they kind of force him to retire. He may just retire on his own. But I'd like to kind of see him one more, maybe, a pride kind of rematch type of thing going on. Maybe a move up to kind of a catchweight thing with Mirko Krokop or something. I'm trying to think outside the box here. I'm not sure. There aren't too many pride guys left.
Yeah, for sure.
Most of them are. Right, yeah.
Him at 205, but he's got booked with Vitor now again. So
right. So yeah. Trying to think here. Maybe even the loser of this weekend's fight in OSP and Glover against Little Nog wouldn't be too bad either.
Yeah, that'd be a great matchup. And like you said, just one more fight for Little Nog, and rather, I mean, he's not going to make a title run or anything. We know that. So have it be something like more fun and his style. Let him get a good boxing match in there and have one more.
The main event of the evening, the aforementioned Ronda Rousey took on Bethe Correia. And when we were breaking down this fight, Billy, people want to talk about the judo and the submissions. I was fairly confident that Ronda Rousey was just going to run over to Bethe Correia and punch her in the face. I don't know how much she planned her strikes and combinations and whatnot, or what the exact game plan was. But that's pretty much what she did. She ran over the Bethe Correia, started punching her in the face. I think Bethe kind of had maybe one or two kind of come in, and then maybe, for lack of a better term, stumbled into kind of a takedown there. Ronda said, nuh-uh, and just kind of shrugged her off. She rolled. Ronda went back in, threw a couple more, and that's when we saw the knockout, and Bethe Correia fall into the canvas face first with the knockout here at 34 seconds. And I think now 2 fights in a row, or 3 fights in a row, she has proved that she can beat you anywhere, and she can beat you standing or submissions. It's not just submissions anymore. She's going to bring it right to you, and if you're not ready for it, you're going to get finished. And so far, only one girl has really been able to survive past 1 round, that being Miesha Tate. And because of that, looks like we're going to get Ronda Miesha 3 coming up next.
Yeah, I'm out of words for Ronda. Like, I've never seen someone so dominant. And I think the key at this point, you can be a little as skilled as her on the feet, you can be as skilled as her on the ground, but until they find someone to match her intensity, it's not even going to be close. She's steamrolling. Like, that fight she just put on, there wasn't nothing super technical. She didn't sit back and outstrike her. She put on a pace and was so much more. I don't even know. It's not. I can't put it into words, but someone has to match her intensity in there, and until then, no one's going to be close.
Well, we're going to get to this fight here in a little bit, but a girl that, at least striking wise, may be able to handle that, but she has to get by a very tough Sarah McMahon, is Amanda Nunes. She's a girl, 10 wins, 9 knockouts. She's a girl that could project, at least striking wise, to maybe hold. Of course, Holly Holm hasn't looked super impressive so far in her 2 UFC fights, but she's a girl that at least has the knockout power. She has that potential. Juliana Pena is a big girl at 135. She can get by Jessica Eye. She's one that projects up. And then, of course, who knows? Maybe Miesha the 3rd time's the charm. When you've already beaten someone twice, even though you're someone the caliber and mental, toughness of Ronda Rousey, it's hard getting up for somebody a 3rd time. That's why they if you look at team sports, it's hard beating a team 4 times out of 7 games. It's tough. And
Yeah.
I think in MMA, very few times have we seen a three-part series with one person up 0-2. Typically it's 1-1. So I maybe because it's Misha and there's been a lot of animosity between those two already, maybe it's not that hard for Ronda to get up, but I always think that if you're already up, 2-0, it's got to be a little tough to get up for that person, and maybe that's somehow where Misha slips in. But that's the onboard of ongoing contenders. Whether or not any of those girls can actually compete with Ronda, it remains to be seen. But that's kind of looking at the forefront. Ingers, I think they're at least. I'll put it this way: they're gonna have a better chance than Bethe Correia. I will tell you that much.
But even then, it's like, all right, you find them and you're like, they're so good at striking. Well, that's not even what Ronda's about. Now they got to worry about her just throwing the back and submitting them. Like, there's nowhere I think they can beat her. And she just keeps getting better, too. She's improving so much, which is insane. By the next fight, she might sit back and just out Muay Thai someone. I don't even know at this point what she's going to do next.
Awfully impressive. As we said, it may exceed all expectations of this card, getting over 1 million buys. And I guess she ended up leaving her UFC belt in Brazil. I guess she was endeared with the fans and fighting down there for the first time. And the reception she got, that she just decided to leave. I'm sure she still has one around. I think there's like a different one every fight. So I'm sure she has one back at her gym and/or residence there in Southern California. But at least the one she had there at UFC 190 was supposedly left there. I don't know whether the UFC picked that up or not. I don't know, but she at least thought she left it there. And I don't know. I think that's a sign of a true martial artist. And she just had it all, whether it was motivation about Betch's comments about her father, whether it was the passing of, kind of a mentor to her in Rowdy Piper, who passed, who allowed her to use the nickname of Rowdy. Whatever the case may be, or she's just simply that much better than Bethe Correia, whatever it is, it was all put on display for UFC 190 in the main event.
Yeah, she keeps getting better. There's no more words for her. I don't know. I don't even want to break down any of her future fights at this point. Like, until she shows a sign of weakness, there's nothing to talk about. Like, I don't see a hole in her game right now.
All right, let's transition and get to this weekend's fight card, UFC Nashville from the Bridgestone Arena in Music City, USA. I will be there live and in person for the fights at Bridgestone Arena. I'm very excited for this. I will also be celebrating my birthday as well, so I figured what better time to celebrate your birthday than some UFC fights, especially for me. Going to have 6 fights on the main card. And, some people may be skipping this one over, but there's some pretty good fights here. And the first fight of the evening, one of the up-and-coming guys here in the flyweight division, as Ray Borg will take on Gene Herrera. And Herrera will be making his UFC debut. He's so far undefeated in his career at 8-0. 5 of those victories are by submission. Looking at Ray Borg, after an early stumble against Dustin Ortiz, who is also featured on this card, he has won 2 straight, including his last victory at UFC Fight Night 60, submitting Chris Kalidas, and 6 of his 8 career victories are by submission. I fully expect a grappling battle between these two. That's kind of what we've seen from Ray Borg so far in the UFC. And I think for Borg, despite that loss to Ortiz and now kind of taking on a newcomer, if he can go out there, first fight in the main card, and get another finish like he did in Broomfield, this is a guy to look out for here in the flyweight division.
Yeah, if he can get a finish here, it'll be a big move for him, even though we don't know much about Herrera. But you're on a main card, Fox Sports 1, and you get a couple wins in a row in the UFC, and that momentum starts. So I don't know much about him, but looking at the submissions of Herrera, so like you said, this will probably either go 2 ways. Either it just turns into a grappling match, or they respect each other enough on the grappling that it just turns up just on the feet. So we'll see where that goes.
The next fight of the evening, this is kind of the fight I was alluding to earlier. This is a big fight here in the women's bantamweight division as Sarah McMahon takes on Amanda Nunes. Looking at McMahon, since winning her first 2 fights in the UFC, she has lost her last 2, including her most recent one against Miesha Tate at UFC 183. 4 of her 8 career victories are by decision. Looking at Nunes, 3-1. She was able to bounce back from her first career loss and defeat Shayna Baszler at Fight Night 62. And as I mentioned, 9 of her 10 career victories are by knockout. This one's pretty easy. If it stays standing, Nunes has proved that she has some of the best knockout power in this division. McMahon, obviously a Olympic silver medalist in women's freestyle wrestling. If it goes to the mat, you got to give the edge to the American McMahon. That's kind of plain and simple, because I think if it stays standing, I don't see any way that Sarah McMahon can win this fight.
Yeah, I think it's striker versus wrestler. If McMahon can put her on her back, she can pull a decision here, or maybe finish her out before. If it stays on the feet, I think Nunes can knock her out. So we'll see who gets the better.
The heavyweight division, Tim Johnson against Jared Rosholt. Looking at Johnson, 1-0 in the UFC. His last fight and his only UFC fight was a win over Shamil Akhtarahimov. I said that correctly. At Fight Night 63, 5 of his 9 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Jared Rosholt, 4-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Josh Copeland at UFC 185, and 5 of his 12 career victories are by decision. Now, I don't know a lot about Tim Johnson, despite having the one win there in the UFC. But I do know a little bit about Jared Rosholt, and this is a guy who has some pretty good wrestling here for the heavyweight division, a guy that, if you know, his brother also fought in the UFC as well. He was a national champion in wrestling. And so the Rosholts have kind of grown up on wrestling. It's just what he does. And for Johnson, I'd say his best bet is to try to keep this standing. Rosholt, I think, got submitted in his second to last fight, so that is something you could catch him in, but I think you're more likely to outpace him on the feet. And I think if you're Johnson, you got to do some moving around, throw a lot of strikes, be in his face, and try to avoid the clinches as possible, because I think if Rosholt gets on top of you, there's really not much you can do when that happens. And I think he's proved in his now 5 UFC fights, he's just the guy you don't want on top of you.
Yeah, you know what he's going to be looking for. So going into this fight, he knows what he has to work for. But I mean, Rosholt, I'm kind of giving away a pick already, but he just has more experience in it. So I think he'll be able to find the better of him and probably grind out a decision when he mixes it between the feet and the wrestling. So Johnson, I don't know much about, so it's hard to say a lot. He's got a good mustache on him.
That he does.
From that I can see. So maybe that'll make the fight interesting, but we'll see.
I was wrong. He got knocked out in the second to last fight against Olenek. I thought he got submitted quickly. So it is proven he's a guy you can knock out, though. That
changes things. And when you get distracted by a mustache like that, we'll see.
Could be. Let's get to the next fight of the evening, and I'm awfully excited for this fight because, as fans know, I got him to fight on this card for my birthday, and that's Smiling Sam Alvey as he takes on Derek Brunson in the middleweight division. Looking at Sam, since dropping his UFC debut, he has won 3 straight fights, all first-round knockouts, most recently knocking out Dan Kelly at Fight Night 65, and 17 of his 26 career victories are by knockout. Looking at his opponent, Derek Brunson, 4-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Ed Herman at UFC 183, and of his 13 career victories, 5 are by knockout. Once again, this is another striker versus grappler fight. We got the great kickboxing and power there of Smiling Sam Alvey. We have the more grappling base, Derek Brunson. And if it stays standing, there's no way Derek Brunson can keep up with Sam. It is proven that not only does he have knockout power, it's the fact that he legitimately one-shot knockout power. I mean, he threw 2 punches against Cesar Fajeda and knocked him out cold. He doesn't need a lot of time or a lot of wind-up to do this. And Derek Brunson, he has to get in close quick. If he stays at range, Sam's punches are powerful. And even when it gets in close, people talk about, that's all Sam Alvey has is the power and stuff. I think he's an underestimated grappler. I mean, he's been training years with like Dan Henderson out there in Temecula. To think he won't be prepared for wrestling, I think is something that will be sorely mistaken by Derek Brunson, because I think Sam will be ready for it. Now, I'm not saying he's probably going to go out there and pull some crazy jiu-jitsu off his back or something, but he's probably practiced a lot of clinch, getting off the cage, countering with some short right hands. Maybe we won't see as many kicks from Sam because of the takedown, but I think he's proven that his hands are more than capable of finishing people off.
Yeah, I think this will be a strong fight for Sam Alvey. And for Brunson, I don't know. I know he's more grappling based. I don't know. He might struggle putting Sam on his back, but I think his best chances in this fight are sort of just putting him up against that cage and getting some dirty boxing in and wearing him down there because straight on the feet, I think he's going to have trouble. I don't know a lot about Sam Alvey off his back, but I don't know. It's going to be tough to get him there. So I think it's best wear him down with some dirty boxing. Just make it a grueling fight for him because if you give him space, we've seen what he can do.
And also, I think he is a conditioned guy, but if Brunson can get out of the first round, which his last of 3 opponents have had, I don't think it will affect Sam because he's such an upbeat guy. He's one of the more mentally, I think, positive individuals in the sport, but maybe subconsciously that will maybe kind of mess with him because his last, 3 fights have gone so smooth that he doesn't put him away. How will that actually affect Smiling Sam?
Yeah, and I'm excited for that one. That will be good.
The main event of the evening in the lightweight division, Michael the Menace Johnson will take on Beneil Dariush. Very big matchup here in the lightweight division. Johnson's 8-4 so far in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Edson Barboza at UFC Fight Night 61. 7 of his 16 career victories are by knockout, and he is riding a 4-fight winning streak. Looking at his opponent, Dariush, he's also riding a 4-fight winning streak. Overall, 5-1 in the UFC. His last fight, probably his biggest so far in his career, as he was able to defeat Jim Miller at Fox 15, and 6 of his 11 career victories are by submission. Now, Dariush, I would say normally his best chance to win would be getting this thing to the ground, but Michael Johnson is a tough guy to take down, first of all, and I don't think so far in the UFC he has been submitted. I'm going to double check that right now, but he's a pretty tough guy to submit. And trying to bring up his fight stats here. Let's see. Michael Johnson, he got submitted against Reza Madadi back in 2013. Actually, okay, I stand corrected. He has been submitted twice so far in the UFC to Paul Sass and, as I said, Reza Madadi. So it could be pulled off by Dariush, but it's been a couple years since he's been submitted, and I think that's probably his best chance. Standing, it's not that I don't think he can hang with Michael Johnson. It's just that why risk it? Michael Johnson, I think, proved in his last fight that he is, getting that dominant cruise, that TJ Dillashaw, that Nick Diaz style with pressure, punches and bunches, changing up the fast strikes, with the hard strikes, the soft strikes, and having great footwork. And I think Dariush has some good footwork, but even as dominant as he's been in his last 2 fights, we haven't really seen that output and knockout power from Dariush. And I think standing up, tilts towards Johnson. The grappling, obviously he submitted Darren Cruikshank, big deal, and he dominated Jim Miller with his grappling in his last fight. So to me, that's kind of his go-to thing. And if it doesn't go there, like I said, I don't think it's that he can't hang. It's just that definitely favors Michael Johnson if it stays standing. I mean, I think that last fight against Barboza was probably his best performance in the octagon.
Yeah, this matchup is so good. And I honestly think the winner of this is 1 fight away from a title shot, hopefully. And Dariush has been, ever since every fight I watch him, he impresses me more. The Cruikshank fight, he stood with him, who not many people want to stand with Cruikshank, and then he ended up getting the grappling and finished him. And Jim Miller, he dominated. And Michael Johnson, he's been around for a while, and he's finally starting to put it together and finally get his style and look dominant. So for both these guys, this is a big fight. This is huge for them. They're 1 away from getting in that real top 5 area. I mean, Johnson's listed at 5, I think, but getting actually talked in title contention. And Johnson, I'm giving away my picks all day here today, but I really think it's Dariush's time, and I think wherever this goes, I think he'll be all right. I don't think, even though why risk it on the feet, I think he'll be able to hang there. And then when Johnson wears down, he gets in these scrambles and everything, Dariush will take the better of him.
The main event of the evening in the light heavyweight division, Glover Teixeira will take on Ovince St. Preux, better known as OSP. Looking at OSP, 6-1 in the UFC. His last fight was victory over Patrick Cummings at Fox 15, and 9 of his 18 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Teixeira, since getting to a UFC title shot, he has lost his last 2 fights against John Jones and Phil Davis. That fight against Phil Davis was all the way back in September of last year at UFC 179, so it's been a while since Glover has been in the octagon. 13 of his 22 career victories are by knockout. And these 2 guys, Billy, are probably 2 of the better knockout artists here in the light heavyweight division. I fully expect a brawl between these 2. Some conventional thinking, Glover, he'll shoot for the takedown, he'll try something different. He's never really done that in his UFC fights. He's been pretty content to stand, and I kind of like to call him, like the Albert Pujols of MMA. He's just the machine. He just keeps coming forward, and you face the raw athleticism and power of Ovince St. Preux, and I think we're just going to see kind of what lasts, because Glover's proved that he's a tough out, and if Ovince doesn't get him, in the first 2 rounds, will his conditioning hold up to Glover, who has proved that he can definitely go all 25 minutes, and I think prove that he just keeps coming regardless of how many punches he's taken or how many he's even thrown. And I really think we kind of see maybe kind of age-wise, Ovince, looks a little older, but fight-wise and actual like time in MMA, he's a lot younger than Glover Teixeira, so I kind of consider him, one of the young guns still in the sport, even though this will be his 8th UFC fight. And if OSP can get this victory, this will now be his 3rd in a row, and it'll be the 3rd over pretty good competition. Shogun, Cummings, now Teixeira. He's a guy to look out for in the light heavyweight division if he can get by Glover Teixeira here.
Yeah, I think the winner of this, same as the last fight, is like one more fight away from a shot. And if you look at the people Ovince has been taking out, I mean, like that knockout of Pat Cummings, we seen, was that the Ronda fight card this weekend? Pat Cummings is a real monster. Like, to do that is ultra impressive. And if he could do that to Glover, Glover's a tall order for anyone to put away. I mean, I think Phil Davis got a decision, but he weared on him. But you're not going to be able to, it's going to be tough to finish this dude. And I think Glover might think he's going to come in with a different approach, but as soon as OSP hits him once, it's going to turn into that brawl. And it's going to just be who out hearts who, I think. I think they're going to stand in the middle and trade.
With that said, let's get to the picks here for UFC Nashville. First fight of the evening in the flyweight division, Ray Borg against Herrera here, making his UFC debut, Gian Herrera. Got to go with Ray Borg here. I was really impressed with his victory there in Broomfield. Newcomer. So give me I think he said the Taz Mexican Devil, Ray Borg.
Yeah, I like Ray Borg in this. He has more experience in the UFC, so.
The next fight of the evening, women's bantamweight division, Sarah McMahon against Amanda Nunes. Really want to pick Sarah McMahon, but I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to go with the young girl there, the Lioness, Amanda Nunes, to get the victory.
I wanted to pick that upset because Amanda has more to prove in the division, like going forward. But I think McMahon's going to be strong coming to 2 losses and really try and get it done. So I think McMahon wins this.
Timothy Johnson against Jared Rosholt in the heavyweight division. I'm intrigued by the mustache of Johnson, but not enough to pick him. So give me Jared Rosholt in this one.
I'm going to go with the upset here. It won me over. Timothy Johnson gets the win.
It's the Don Fry, or I guess now the Tom Lawler mustache there. There's no Reebok branding on that, right?
Nope.
All right, middleweight division, Sam Alvey against Derek Brunson. I think his fans know who I'm going with here, so give me Smiling Sam.
Yeah, I'm going to agree here. Sam Alvey, I think, gets a big knockout.
Michael Johnson against Beneil Dariush in the lightweight division, co-main event of the evening. I'm super excited about this fight. I think this is a very under-the-radar fight. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how good these 2 lightweights are. Either a victory by either puts them in that talk for title contention. I seriously believe that. But I think the pressure, I think the footwork, and that striking of Michael Johnson, I think Dariush hasn't seen something like that yet. I think he's going to be... He knows Dariush will try to counter with takedowns, and I think Michael Johnson takes this one. It's going to be close, but I'm going to go with the menace Michael Johnson here.
I like Dariush, just mixing it up with how strong his grappling is, and he's so smart. He'll find a way to counter on that stand-up, so I think Dariush gets the win here.
Light heavyweight division main event of the evening, OSP Ovince St. Preux fighting in his hometown of Nashville, Tennessee against the former title challenger Glover Teixeira. Like I said, Teixeira, he's the Terminator, he's the machine. He just keeps coming. But I think fighting in his hometown, it's going to stay standing. I think he's going to be amped up. I think he's kind of on a roll right lately with these 2 straight knockout victories. Going with the hometown guy. I'm going with the former University of Tennessee linebacker, Ovince St. Preux.
Yeah, I think I like that. He has his hometown. Glover's getting a little more worn down in his fights, and I think Owens can knock you out walking backwards, forward. So when it stays on the feet, I like him in this fight.
All right, anything else to add before we end this week's show, Billy?
Nothing much. I just enjoy those fights in Nashville.
I will try to, and I'm looking forward to it. And quick program, if you missed it last week on our audio version, it's now up here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. I got a chance to talk with the karate hottie herself, Michelle Watterson, following her first UFC victory at the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale. So if you haven't checked that already, please go check that out. And also, we got a couple interviews. Billy and I are going to talk to 2 big winners coming out of Lee's Summit, Missouri. That's right. They both won in the first round at UFC on Fox 16 from Chicago. We're going to talk to teammates Zach Cummings and James Krause about their big victories at UFC on Fox 16. So look for those interviews here on YouTube as well as our audio version podcast, which can be found on iTunes. So for Billy Brandt, you can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. I am Jim Graham. Follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.